Hey guys, welcome back to the Kingdom Vision podcast. I'm here today with my buddy Bruce, and he's the pastor over at Baxter Baptist Church. Bruce, where is Baxter Baptist Church exactly?
It's about 8 miles east out of Athens on 175.
Well, if you're in that area or looking for a place that's um, not exactly what you might expect in church, is that a fair assessment, Bruce?
That's a fair statement.
Give him a buzz, give him a talk. Today we're going to be talking about week 4. We are in week 4 of our devotion series. This week we're visiting the fall, which, as you learned in your readings this week, it is the first of the 3 major rebellions against God that we're going to talk about. But today and this week we're focusing on the temptation that Satan had, or that he brought, the fall itself, and the sin that entered into the world, and then God's response. We want to talk a little bit about how God responded in the moment at the time of the rebellion. Stay with us. All right. Well, welcome back. And what I wanted to do today, Bruce, if it's okay with you, I just before we jump into the topic today, I wanted to give a shout out to our buddy Tim. He's not with us today because he is in another country. He's doing the ministry work this week at a missionary training conference. He's going to be back, and he's just doing the deal there. He was going to try to be on with us today, but couldn't make it. And so wanted to give him a shout out. You guys pray for Tim, and as he's doing his travels, and he's kind of our foreign wing, goes down into Mexico, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and stuff. So he's busy doing that this week. So y'all keep him in your prayers. But Bruce, we want to talk about the fall. This week in our readings, we had all kinds of stuff that we've been talking about, but again, we're concentrating on the temptation, the decision, and then God's response. Bruce, what did you take out of your readings today, this week?
Well, the main thing I got, Matt, was how important it is that we begin to understand what happened here in this very first rebellion, right? It's important that we understand what happens because I say it all the time that the devil is a punk and he has no new tricks, right? So as
Right.
we're reading through here, what we see happen, I see happen over and over and over all day long, every day. And I think it's going to be a great topic to dig into and to give some insight for our folks. You know what? This is not new. It happens. What do I do about it?
Exactly. And one of the things we talked about in our readings this week was a lot of people, and I say a lot of people, I'm learning that a lot of people kind
Right.
of view Genesis 3 as, well, they just broke a rule. And one of the things we talked about in our readings this week is there was so much more that happened in that moment than them just breaking a rule.
Right.
The implications of what happened in the garden, it actually started before them breaking the rule. I mean, Bruce, you've probably heard it said before that, there was no sin, there was no negative in the world until Eve took that fruit. But the truth is that the deceiver and the accuser that was there with her had already begun his
Right.
descent into rebellion. And you know, I love what you said there, because he's like, he has no new game. He has
Right.
no new playbook. He's running the same playbook. But what gets me, Bruce, is that we keep falling for the same play.
Right. Right.
Oh, you say you see it all the time. I see it all the time. But he didn't come in and say God's not real. Sometimes in our culture we get to be worrying about people that don't think God is real. We worry about atheism and things. That's not even where Satan came in. He was just like, did God really say?
Right.
Is that really what God said? I mean, Bruce, have you encountered that in your own walk with the Lord, where you kind of were like, I'm not sure God really said that or not? I mean, is that something that you've experienced? Maybe not. I don't know. Just thought I'd throw it out
Yeah.
there.
It's one of those things where I have I was not in church, and then what church I was in was like we'll just use directional here. It was way far to the left. There was a bunch of things going on there that were way outside of my norm. And then whenever I started in high school going to church on a regular basis, it was way over here to the other side. And everybody had a reason for everything they did. And the older I've gotten, the more I'm like, I don't see that. What does this say? Right?
Right. Right.
Our opinions, and like with the snake here, is I think we can do this. I'm not sure God said that. Well, there's our opinion. My wife said this beautifully the other day. We were having a ride, and she said, there's right and there's wrong, but then there's truth.
Oh, well, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, and truth. It's like you said last week when Joshua was talking to the general of the Lord's armies. Whose
Right.
side are you on? Neither. I'm on the
Neither.
side of truth. Right. So that's what we're trying to discover here, and you can see that's what the deceiver is questioning. Truth.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and like you said, he's still running that game
Right.
today. I mean, we see it on the news. You see it in all of this, even in like odd stuff like gender dysphoria and gender confusion and all of this stuff that's been plaguing, our culture for the last several years. Is we've now taken on ourselves this idea of, are we sure that's what God said? And even sometimes our healthy questions about, did God really say this? Like you said, I grew up in the same kind of culture that was way to the right, very conservative, um, to the point of legalism. And so there was a healthy level of, am I sure God said that?
Right.
Um, but wasn't from the standpoint of reading it and saying, well, yes, God said that, but I don't want him to have said that. So now I'm going to question it. It's, is
Mm,
what people are telling me that God said. But when I can look into the scriptures and say, wait, he either did or he didn't really say this.
right.
And so we get into that place, and as the fall was happening, one of the points we made this week was that Eve was deceived, and scriptures bear this out. But Adam wasn't deceived. Adam made a choice.
Right.
And that was, to me, I guess one of the stark things I wanted to kind of talk about was, I've heard women say, maybe you can speak to this too, like, man, when I get to heaven, me and Eve are going to have a chat, I
Right.
want to seek her out. But the scripture's pretty clear. She was deceived. And why she was deceived, how she could be in a place to be deceived, that's kind of a whole nother discussion. Um, but after she had taken the fruit, it was always kind of struck me at the way those scriptures actually read was, and Adam, who was with her, also took the fruit. So he was there. He wasn't deceived. He chose not, he didn't choose the deceiver. He didn't choose the deception. He actually chose Eve over God.
Come on.
And, I believe, and this is not, this is one of those things that you put the parenthesis, this is where I believe, the scripture isn't explicit here. I believe Adam knew exactly what he was doing in terms of the choice that he was making.
Right.
I don't know that he understood the depth of the ramification.
Right. Right.
Um,
Can I
Go ahead.
pause right there for a
Yeah,
second?
please do.
Man, I'm blessed. I get to do lots of ministry where we help folks that are, been incarcerated or
Mm,
homeless or addicted or something like that. And whenever you're helping someone and they're coming out of a lifestyle, it's one of those things where, I can wave the red flag all I want, but they don't want to hear it.
mm,
Almost without fail, whenever they're making leaps in their faith, right?
right.
They've been in a bad spot and been single. Now they're making leaps in their faith, and I can almost tell when they're about to get something, because then here comes a member of the opposite sex. And so
Mm,
often just like Adam, they choose that relationship over pursuing the relationship with Christ that's been sprung up in them.
Well, and it doesn't just happen with the opposite sex. As a pastor, we lost a bunch of people one time from our church, and when I finally sat down with them and was like, "Okay, tell me what did we do wrong? You know,
Right.
what's this?" There was a group of them, and the reason is because their children weren't happy. We weren't
Mm,
doing enough. We weren't having enough fun. That's what it really boiled down to. We were
right.
too focused on scriptures and things like that. And I'm not being flippant about it. That really was their reasoning.
Right.
But they chose and to let their children lead where the family would worship and how the family would worship and what was important versus what they felt like was right. I mean, they even expressed lament over the decision, like, well, we really want to stay, but the kids this and this and that. And so they chose that relationship over what they knew in their heart to be the obedient thing. At times it has blown my mind, but you're spot on that it's so easy for us to choose the tangible relationship over for us the one that's kind of intangible.
Right. Right.
But for them, it wasn't that way. I mean, God was walking with them in the garden, and He walked in, He being Adam, and He made this decision. One of the things I wanted to explore and kind of pick your brain on is one of the things we read in this story is we have the temptation. Eve takes the fruit. Adam takes the fruit. And the immediate response is that they begin to feel shame before there
Mm.
was ever any judgment, before there was ever any punishment. And I want to pick your brain. Why do you think that the shame came in before the punishment even got there?
What you just said, they made the choice, right? Uh, I told my congregation a couple of weeks ago, I was like, we get into this conversation of being attacked spiritually, right? I'm under spiritual attack. I'm under spiritual attack. I'm not making small of that because I know it happens. But at the same time, I can think of a whole lot of times in my life had nothing to do with spiritual attack. I got out from God's covering and I walked over here
Mm-hmm.
and I did something I wasn't supposed to do, right? And guess
Right.
what? I knew when I got there, I was ashamed of where I was, right? So leaving there, I was double ashamed. So they knew it going in that they were choosing to not make the right choice. Woo! They were choosing to not make the right choice going in, and they knew it.
And I agree 100%. And, I used to tell my kids when they were little, and you're trying to find the right words to deal with them when they've done stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I found myself a lot of times going, no, you know what you did. I don't need to tell them all the time that this was right or that this was wrong because they really know in their heart of hearts. What we're really dealing with is the aftermath of their knowing. They,
Right.
and Adam and Eve knew. And as I said in one of the readings, and now they can't trust each other either because now they know what each other's capable of.
Right.
And, and now that I've always found it very interesting that one of the phrases that pops up, they took it and then they were naked and ashamed. Well, they were naked 5 minutes ago,
Right.
and there was nothing wrong with it. But all of a sudden they're exposed
Mm.
physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so they did. Let me pause and back up. You said something earlier that it's very interesting. Ecclesiastes will tell us there's nothing new under the sun. It's the same playbook. Well, our reactions are all the same too, a lot of times.
Right.
What was their first thing that they did was they said, well, we better fix this.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to cover ourselves. Let's go get some leaves and what have you. Of course, then God comes in. Adam, where are you? Like he didn't know, And one of the things we covered is he wasn't really looking for them. It wasn't that he didn't know.
Right.
He also understands what's happening, what has happened, and he's calling them back to himself. And they hid from him. I can't tell you how many times I personally, and I've counseled with people who have made that choice, like you said, to do what they know they're not supposed to do, and their immediate response is to try to hide. How do you counsel people that are hiding, that are running and hiding? I mean, what do you tell them?
My testimony. My testimony along the way is, man, I got saved, and then I did this, and then I got saved, and I did this, and going down the road. And in my 30s, I had this experience, but every time in my walk, I would run into something that was shameful. The expression I use is when I fell in the ditch,
Mm.
right? I just laid there, or I wallowed in the mud. Uh, and in my 40s, I had an experience with the Lord, and He very clearly showed me, you're going to fail, you're going to mess
Right.
up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's about the ditch then. Okay, I failed, I messed up, I either uh, was deceived, or I made a choice, and from there, I had to determine to get up out of the ditch, get back on the road, and determine that every time I failed from that point forward, I was going to spend less and less time in shame, and more readily run back to the Father and say, "Dad, I messed up again. I'm sorry."
Yeah. I had a guy tell me one time that the mark of maturity is when we mess up, we either run away from God and hide, or we run to God for help.
Right, right,
And the latter is the one that marks our maturity, where we can go and say, "Dad, I messed up."
right,
And it's hard to think of Adam and Eve as being immature. They walked
right.
with God in the garden, but they really did have an immature human response.
Right,
I had a lady on a comment on a thread this week, say that she'd never really considered sin as this universal problem. And
right,
we kind of gloss over that a lot of times in our teaching. I think that, sure, we know everybody's a sinner by nature, sinner by choice. We give that out, but I don't know that we ever take enough time all the time to talk about the fracture that really happened in the garden. That
right,
it was at the DNA level. I mean, literally, it's passed on in our DNA. We are broken, and it's a relationship. It's not just we break rules. It's not just that we lie when we should tell the truth. That's all true,
right.
but we do those things because we are fundamentally now broken
Yes, sir.
in our relationship with God. And I'm looking at our time here. We just got a few minutes left. Um, I do want to say that this week's all about what went wrong,
Right.
the temptation. There was already rebellion in the heavenly host, apparently. And people want to get wrapped up in those timelines and how all that happened. That's not really our purpose. But then humanity fell. God's plan for bringing heaven to earth and this communal existence is now off the rails, as it were. Um, and this next week, we're going to talk about what it looks like after this, the exile, the kicking out of the garden. We're going to talk about that and how God even responds in that. But I didn't want to miss today, uh, going back and talking about God's response and what it wasn't. I mean, Bruce, when you were talking about you grew up, or you kind of came into this relationship with the Lord in a more very, I will just say, conservative, maybe legalistic, very
Right.
rigid
Right.
place. I kind of grew up with this thing that I was always afraid that God was just waiting for me to screw up, to blow me up, and get me. I mean, does that ring a bell for you? Or
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people all the time that the night I got saved, the old preacher literally scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, you've been there,
Yeah.
done that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I went to sleep at night going, I don't know if I'm saved, Lord, but maybe this time I want it to be real, because I don't want to go to hell.
Hmm. Right.
I even heard a pastor say one time, he said, being saved to stay out of hell is not the best reason, but it's not the worst either. And and while I get that, I understand that, there's a side of God that I want people not to miss. Is he came in with judgment, he came in with punishment. They're going to get kicked out of the garden at the end of the chapter. Humanity's broken. Sin has come. It's in our DNA now. Now we have to be redeemed and rescued. All of that's true, but his first act was to bring them and say, no, you were kind of right in that you need to be covered, but you covering you is not going to work.
Right. Right.
He said, you need to let me do that.
Yep.
And I think the sadder part of the story versus sin came in, yes, but what really came in that moment was the first instance of what we see of death, where he made the sacrifice of the animals to cover them in skins. Now,
Right.
there's a debate about whether or not they actually ate animals up to that point or not. I'm not going to get into that. But there's a lot of indication that that wasn't the case, that
Right.
they ate of the
Right.
fruit, and the scriptures talk about that. But in that moment, that very first sacrifice, there was loss of life
Yeah.
to cover through the blood. It was the first indication of what we see in the gospel. And for me, I think about those animals that had to give their life to cover humans.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a silly thought, but
Mhm.
it's one of those things that there's a deep ramification in what happens here, in the fracture and the damage that it did to creation, not just us. You know, how many times have we heard the gospel preached, Jesus died for your sin? That's true, but it's way deeper and bigger than your sin and my sin. And right, right. I had a former student reach out to me the other day about something I'd said on Facebook or something she had some questions about, and it was a really good conversation. But where we were talking about being able to stand on truth, take a stand on issues. She specifically was talking about abortion and things like that. Um, and then how do you also show empathy and kindness to people who are in that position? And she said she read in a book, or maybe I think it was in a book. They described it as um, a, a hardcore with soft edges, meaning we can take a stand on what you can and cannot abide with. Like God said, we got to deal with this. There's punishment coming, judgment's coming. And yet in that moment, he's gracious and he's kind. And I don't see in the garden, even in the judgment, I don't see this angry God that people claim is in the Old Testament. You know, that's the angry God. I just don't see that. What I see is sadness, disappointment, and a ton of mercy and grace. Because I think when he covered them, to me, that was a symbol of, you screwed this up, but I'm going to fix it. And then next week, we're going to talk about his compassion that he continues to have for them as they go out into exile, as they go in east of Eden and begin to live their life away from that pure presence. And now we have to do it a different way. So I think it's going to be a good week of reading. Guys, if you're watching this and you're doing the readings, please, 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 there's reflection questions in each one. Hop online, get on the Facebook pages, and answer some of those questions for us. Let's get some conversation going. Let's get some community going there about it, whether it's in the group, on the ministry page, or on our profile. Any place. It helps us. It helps us get our message out, and it'll help us to know, are we hitting, are we vibing? I think that's what the Gen Zers would say. Are we vibing? And I don't know if that even somebody's going to watch this and go, Dad, please. I can see my kid, Dad, please stop trying to use the words. But are we making a connection? So, give us some help. Like the pages. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Do all the things. If you don't yet have the Crucibles Fire app, I'll put the what's it called? The website, where you can go get that, or go to your favorite either Apple Store or Google Play and find the Crucibles Fire app. All of the devotions are in there. All of our trainings are in there. Our online academy's in there. If you want to go deeper, there's lots of opportunities and lots of material. If you're out there on 175 this week looking for a place to go to church, Baxter Baptist Church, would love to see you and love to minister to you. If you're over in Lindale, Tyler, you got Cross Brand Cowboy Church. Shameless plug for the t-shirt. But we love you. We hope that you will find someplace, if it's safe and not icy this week, to go and get with God's people, because God didn't just save you out of your mess. He saved you into a group of people, into a body. So go connect with them somewhere, and y'all do that. Bruce, you got any final words, man? All right. We love you guys. Talk to you later. You guys have a good time.